It is an honor to be here today. Thank you for inviting me, Deborah. And I get to introduce your speaker. So without further ado, Dr. Irma McClaurin is an activist, anthropologist, facilitator, feminist, mentor, award-winning writer, professor, and a champion for diversity. Through the course of her many-faceted career, Dr. McClaurin has written everything from poetry to creative nonfiction. In addition, she has helped companies integrate diversity and equity into their organizational structures, and she has coached institutions through leadership transitions and succession. Dr. McClaurin has served as president of Shaw University and holds a PhD and master's in anthropology and a master's of fine arts in English, both from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. As an activist anthropologist, Dr. McClaurin has committed her life and career to helping others transform the world. Now, if you attended the 2013 exhibit of Race, Are We So Different at the Rochester Museum and Science Center, then you are already acquainted with her work and her outlook. In all of these roles and every facet of her background and her actions, Irma McClaurin has been informed by her deep sense of social justice. And her ability to communicate this allows her to ignite a fire in every audience she comes across. To put it simply, Dr. McClaurin believes that by changing hearts, by changing minds, you change behavior and achieve something truly transformative. Now, I've been told to tell you to get ready because this is going to change you. May we all welcome Dr. Irma McClaurin.
Thank you so much. Wow. First of all, I am just utterly overwhelmed with the response to see this level of commitment and interest in hearing me speak, but also in Susan B. Anthony and her legacy. She would be profoundly moved, I am sure, because I certainly am. So I want to talk about Susan B. and me, agents of change or change agents in our own right. And I want to begin with a quote from her. She wrote, "If any proof were needed of the progress of the cause for which I have worked, it is here tonight. The presence on the stage of these college women and in the audience of all those college girls who will someday be the nation's greatest strength tell their own story to the world. They give the highest joy and encouragement to me." These were the words Susan B. Anthony spoke at the 1906 National American Women's Suffrage Association, held in Baltimore. It was her own organization. She had founded and presided over for 4 decades. Some of you here today celebrate Susan B's 199th birthday are descendant of those very college girls in her audience, whom she knew were destined to become, quote, this nation's greatest strength, and whose very presence would tell their own story to the world. To you, I say welcome. Some of you had no representation in that historic audience in 1906 because of the tension between those who pushed for racial equality and those who struggled for women's electoral equality. This fissure persists today, as recent media coverage informed us that the massive Women's March that mobilized almost 5 million women 2 years ago was now struggling with internal conflicts around leadership, diversity, and inclusion. We must do better. I wonder what Susan B. would say, seeing that once again, the clash between racial equality and women's quest for equal rights have divided us. It is up to us to heal this wound. Whichever side of this divide you find yourself, I extend a hearty welcome to you. On January 3rd, 2019, the 116th Congress made history, swearing into office the largest number of women ever, 127, to serve in Congress. In addition, 25 women were to serve in the Senate. Moreover, Nancy Pelosi continues to wield the gavel as the first and only female House Speaker. I think Susan would be proud. What do you think? Yeah. And there's so many more firsts that I cannot name. Native American women, Latino women, people who have not had a voice, they are now demonstrating that indeed, whether they were college students or not, they are this nation's greatest strength. Am I right? Now, Susan B. would be proud because she predicted such greatness, right? She knew that this was eventually going to come. But I want to say, before this critical mass of women became elected officials, there were other women breaking the barriers without a lot of support. And what Susan B. had to say to us, she cautioned, quote, "We shall someday be heated, and when we shall have our amendment to the Constitution of the United States, everybody will think it was always so. Just exactly as many young people believe that all the privileges, all the freedom, all the enjoyments which women now possess always were hers," end quote. The success of this group of elected officials to the Congress and Senate is because of the women in the past who helped to tear down the barriers. Yeah. So if you're not hitting a glass ceiling, it's because someone else already broke it through. You need to remember the history. And so I want to extend my personal warm welcome to the women representatives of the state and local government who are here today. I know that the Honorable Lieutenant Kathy Hochul had to leave, but the Honorable Mayor Lovely Warren, these were the women who were breaking the glass ceiling well before this year. So you need to give them their props. When you all ran for office and won, your political success made you a game changer. And every day that you serve, you are leaving an inspiring legacy for young people of every political persuasion, every gender, every phenotype, every religion. You have proven the impossible is possible. And we must remember the struggles you endured to achieve success. Let us not be blinded by the fact that there are so many women. It was hard to get there. And there's so many others who have been lost along the way or who we've forgotten. You now have great company in Congress and in the Senate. But don't forget the history of the battles you fought to get to where you are. To everyone else in today's audience who's not covered in any of the categories that I mentioned above, especially the men, let's see a wave of the men's hands. Yeah, put your hands in the air. All right. Who are supporting this event, I extend to you a heartfelt welcome. It will take all of us to achieve whatever it is that we need to happen, all of us. Finally, to the organizers of this magnificent celebration by the National Susan B. Anthony Museum and House, especially to Deborah Hughes, President and CEO, and who I came to know when we both served as co-chair of the 2018 Seneca Falls Revisited Women's Equality Conference held here in Rochester last summer, and who I now count among my small circle of people I call friends. Thank you for this invitation. There are many things that I could address with regard to Susan B. and me, change agents in our own right. I could speak about the fact that several recent articles have pointed out that Black suffragists endured segregation and were often the proverbial hidden figures of the suffrage movement. I could mention that history has perpetuated the struggle for women's equality as if it were the domain of white women only. There are critical voices who wish to acknowledge what seems to be an erasure of black women's involvement in the suffrage movement and have accused Susan B. Anthony of taking a race stance in which she elevated white women over black men to gain electoral rights. There is some truth to that. There's also some truth to the fact that Susan B. was involved in the anti-slavery movement, that she spoke out against lynching, that she was involved in the Underground Railroad, and that she hosted black women at her home, such as Ida B. Wells. In other words, Susan B. was complicated. She was a woman both ahead of her time and a product of her time. She was consistent in some areas and contradictory in others. Overall, she was human. As to her position on slavery, she was against it, and there were those among the colored, i.e. black community, who viewed her as both a champion and friend of those anti-slavery advocates. That is certainly the belief of her contemporary, Hester Jeffrey, who eulogized Susan B. in the following way. She wrote, "We, the colored people of Rochester, join the world in mourning the loss of our true friend, Susan B. Anthony. Yes, a true friend of our race." And she talks about the fact that she had met her at the celebration of William Lloyd Garrison's birthday, where Susan B. then spoke of her life's work, the suffrage movement, told us how for more than 60 years she had given our race every thought of her life. She bade us to look forward in brighter days, to better and brighter days that would surely come as a race. And as we looked up into her sweet face and listened to the words, it seemed like a benediction. Little did we think it would be her last address to us as a race. She was our friend, and she cites the colored churches in the city, the National and State Federation of Colored Women, the Federated Clubs or Association. She was our friend for many years, our champion. Sleep on, dear heart, in peace, for we have looked into thy face, we who have heard thy voice, we who have known something of thy great life work. We pledge ourselves to devote our time and energies to the work thou hast left us to do, end quote. So whatever Susan B. Anthony's flaws were around her position on race equality versus women's rights, she certainly inspired within some segments of Rochester's black community a belief in her wisdom, her support, and her life's work of women's equality. While alive, SB established a personal living legacy. And in death, that legacy continues, and you all are the evidence of it. It is the very reason we are gathered here today. So I love the sort of lesson that you gave us, Kitty, about being financially independent. What I want to do is to talk to you about creating a personal living legacy. In her book, A Journey That Matters, Your Personal Living Legacy, my friend and my coach, Irlene Belton, writes this: "Your living legacy encompasses all of who you are, your personality, your passion, your pain, your joy, your sadness, your progress, your mistakes, your love, your hate, your hopes and dreams, and so much more." She says your name could be repeated for centuries by many generations. You may have streets, businesses, or buildings named after you in your community, your state, or throughout the country. Or you could become an international phenomenon known for changing something that affects the entire world. Sound like somebody we know? This describes Susan B. Anthony precisely. She left a personal legacy, living it in her life and then leaving it at her death. So what does it mean when I call her a change agent? Malcolm Gladwell in The Tipping Point says, quote, "The success of any kind of social epidemic," and I guess we could call the struggle for women's equality a social epidemic, is heavily dependent on the involvement of people with a particular and rare set of social gifts. Those social gifts are described by George Couros, who defines himself as a learner, educator, and an innovative teaching, learning, and leadership consultant. And he identifies 5 characteristics of a change agent. 1, and as I call them out, if you see yourself in this, raise your hand, okay? Clear vision. For me, a change agent who has clear vision is someone who has purpose, a vision, and the ability to see the impossible as possible. Change agents are able to step outside their comfort zone and with little regard for personal consequences. Patient yet persistent. Anybody hear themselves in that? There are no change agents in this room? Really? Rachel, I didn't see you raise your hand. I know you would. Okay, let's get them hands going. Patient yet persistent. A change agent is like a dog with a bone. It means even in face of brutal criticism, which certainly Susan B. endured, ridicule, change agents continue to carry the banner of our ideas forward without discouragement or any sense of failure. Change agents persist. Ask tough questions. Change agents, they ask tough questions. Yeah, raise your hand. Raise your hand. All right, okay. Being a change agent means stepping on toes and not backing off when people say ouch. Susan B. Anthony carried forth the banner of women's equality for all of her adult life. She certainly stepped on toes. She stepped on the toes of Frederick Douglass when she refused to concede that black men be granted the vote before white women. His position of, quote, black men first and white women afterwards, end quote. Both of them forgetting black women in this debate now. Here's how she responded to him. If Mr. Douglass had noticed who clapped for him when he said black men first and white women afterwards, he would have seen that they were all men. The women did not clap for him. Knowledgeable and leads by example. Who here is knowledgeable and leads by example? Do not be shy. If you hear yourself in this, let's see that hand go up. If your hand's in the air, yeah, okay. Susan B. continued her response to Douglass in no uncertain terms. She was knowledgeable. She told him, what we demand is that women shall have the ballot, for she will never get her other rights until she demands them with the ballot in her hand. It is not a question of precedent between women and black men. Neither has a claim to precedent upon an equal rights platform. We're all in this together. Susan B. was not afraid to take unpopular stances and also stepped on the toes of white segregationists when she spoke out against the instituted segregation policy of the Women's Club of America. She said, the color line cannot be drawn. It would be as sensible to bar women because of the shade of their eyes. If a woman is intellectual, of good faith and character, and stands for progressive women in the largest sense, it makes no difference what her color or nationality may be. Yeah. We could pass that on to some people today, couldn't we? If a woman is intellectual, and I don't think she necessarily meant in an academic sense, but someone who is thinking and reading and bettering herself, and you do not have to go to college or school to do that, of good faith, whether it's religious faith or spirituality, but some sensibility about that, and character, which is that you have principles, and stands for the progress of women in the largest sense of the word. It makes no difference what her color or nationality may be. We need to remember those words. Colored women should be given an equal footing with white women when they are working for the same end. Did you hear me? Yeah. In today's vernacular, Black women, women of color should be given an equal footing with white women when we are working for the same end. And finally, change agents build strong relationships built on trust. In her personal life, Susan B. once terminated a worker who refused to take dictation from Ida B. Wells, who was her house guest. In response to the woman who said, "But I didn't choose to write for a colored woman," she said, "I engaged to work for you." Susan B. said, "Well, when I ask an employee to do a favor to a guest, I expect her to comply." Guess what happened to that person? She got her walking papers. So, being principled. So how many of you are change agents and can relate to Susan B? Raise your hand. How many of you consider yourselves change agents? Yeah. All right. I'm going to hold you to that. There are a few lessons that we can derive from her life and her legacy as a change agent. When we read through her writings and we hear the debates about her position, we come to understand that the decisions we make, the choices we make, though seemingly right at the time, have consequences. I wonder if she would go back and rethink her conversation with Douglas, right? Your convictions must be consistent in your public-facing life and in your private-facing life. And so publicly, she denounced segregation, and she also refused to have it in her house. You must call out injustices wherever they appear and at any age. Susan B. was 83 when she openly criticized Southern politicians who sought to deny constitutional guarantees. She wrote, quote, "To refuse qualified women and colored men the right of suffrage and still count them on the basis of representation is to add insult to injury and is unjust as it is unreasonable." Yeah. 83, I should be so lucid. I have no idea if my birthday will ever be celebrated in such a glorious way 199 years from now. Wish. So I'm taking advantage of participating in this one and vicariously wondering, what would Susan B. say to each of you? Think about it. What might she say to you? Change agents are catalysts, but they need everyday supporters, and without them, they cannot succeed. So each of you, whether you see yourself as a change agent, the fact that you're here, the fact that you visit the museum and you support it, you're part of that kind of, I don't want to use the word army because it's too militaristic, but that cadre of supporters that she absolutely relied upon. We still need you in the struggle for racial equality as well as women's rights, right? When you leave, when you have such support, even 199 years later, it makes you fearless. You think you can do anything. Each of you here proves that failure is impossible. It's just not in the cards, right? Failure is impossible. So let me just shift a little bit and talk about my personal journey as a change agent. And I'm just going to share a little bit of biographical background that's not in there. I have a PhD, I have 2 terminal degrees, but my father had a second-grade education. My mother dropped out of high school and then graduated from night school the same year that I did. So I am first generation of my extended family who went to college. There were no silver bullets. I'm also a segregationist baby. I'm also a beneficiary of the civil rights movement. And so all of those things, I'm part of that generation of people who moved from the South to the North, thinking that they were moving into better conditions, only to find that all that was promised was not, in fact, gold. So I'm not Susan B., but I have been called relentless and energetic like her. I have used writing as my platform for my work as a champion of both racial equality and gender equality. And when I was doing my writing program back in the 1970s, early, people would say to me, but Irma, are you black first or are you a woman first? And I'm like, I don't live my life bifurcated. I do not walk down the street with half of me saying woman and half of me saying black. It's one package, right? It's one package. So if you don't carry things that mark you as racialized or as different, if you're part of the dominant culture, you got to understand, we don't think in that way. It's all together, okay? Every professional position I've ever had over the course of 40 years, I've promoted social equality, meaning greater access around gender and race. My brother had polio, so I've always been a disability advocate. You know, these are things that are part that, you look at me, you don't know that. So you don't know what history people are carrying with you, and you need to think about that before you judge people. But most importantly, and up until 2014, I had never held a job that had diversity or multiculturalism in the title. Every job I had was a traditional position in which I always made sure that I was talking about access, equality, gender equality. That was always part of my program and my ethics and my principle. So you don't need a diversity officer to tell you to do the right thing. A friend of mine, Dr. Janetta Cole, who is president of Spelman, retired as the director of the Smithsonian African Art Museum. She's kind of been my mentor for years, and she says leadership should never struggle with diversity. That's what it means to be a leader. And so if you're having that struggle, you got to ask yourself, are you a real leader? My personal motto, you know, is change hearts, you change minds, change behavior, achieve transformation. How many of you change agents want to achieve transformation? Let me see your hands. Okay, all right. You got some recruits out there, okay? Make sure you get their names. So by writing, I work on people's hearts and minds. I try to give them information in order to hopefully change their behavior. I speak truth to power. But my latest cause is the establishment of the Irma McClaurin Black Feminist Archive. This is my baby. I have raised my children, and so this is it. And it's my vision as a change agent, and I intend to persist with it. I will be unmovable, unshakable. Why? Because in the telling of the history of the 15th and 19th Amendment, black women were absent. You don't hear a lot about their participation, but there were black suffragists. So it becomes my responsibility. They are made peripheral. I want to bring them back into the center discourse. So how many of you who didn't raise your hand are prepared to be change agents when you leave this room? If you didn't raise your hand, let me see you raise it now, okay? Yeah. Okay, we got some work to do. So let me go over those characteristics again. A change agent is someone who has clear vision, someone who is patient yet persistent, someone who asks tough questions, who is knowledgeable and leads by example, and finally, someone who builds strong relationships based on trust. So as you leave this room, I want to charge you with this mandate. I want to give you an action item to understand that the women's rights and racial justice fight and struggle are interconnected. You can't have one without the other. So if you see yourself as an advocate of women's rights, then you need to also be an advocate of racial justice. You must develop patience, yet be persistent in building alliances and coalitions. It is not going to be one person who does it. Susan B. had a cadre of women that she tasked to help her with. She did not present herself as the star. In fact, often when people were sort of, giving her accolades, she'd stand back and say, yeah, but there are a whole bunch of other people that I relied upon. And so it's going to take all of us to do this work. Always question yourself as well as others. When you make decisions, you got to ask yourself, am I operating out of my own self-interest, whether that is a racial interest, a gender interest? And men, you need to take notes, okay? Link the history of black suffragists with the legacy of Susan B. And I was glad to hear Deborah talk about how they're expanding sort of the narrative of who this struggle included, who was involved in it. And I think that's going to be really critical, because that's going to bring young people of color to know that there were people who looked like them who were as much a part of making the 19th Amendment happen, okay, as Susan B. That's important. Yeah. Build partnerships of trust that promote racial justice alongside women's equality. Women will never be completely free if any other group of people continue to be oppressed. That is a fact. If you follow this prescription, then in the words of Susan B. Anthony, failure is impossible. We will then truly be e pluribus unum, one nation undivided. So let me just ask, all the change agents in the room, just stand up and be counted. Real quick, stand up, I want to see you. I want to see our power. All right. All right, yes, yes. All right. Yes, let's do a little wave here. Let's do a change agent wave. Woo! All right. Yes, yes. Yes, yes. Look and see, because you might not have known that that was a change agent sitting next to you. And so it is up to you, change agents. Anything that we want to see progress, racial justice, equal rights for women, the ERA, it's up to you, it's up to us to make it happen. Thank you very, very much.